And we are live. There we go. I am live. Very excited to have Mr. Brian Carroll on, author of The Gift of Injury, world record holder, McGill method certified practitioner, licensed masseuse, was going to be a policeman at one time. I mean, a whole bunch of things. So a very, very interesting show for everybody today. So Brian, thanks for coming on. You know, as people ask me, now that the show's grown to a certain level, I'll get messages on Instagram, social media, or whatever, or some of the people I coach or friends will ask who you having on next. And when I told them to people not in that were in your world, that were in the powerlifting world, obviously you're extremely well known, world record holder. Everybody knows your name that way. The same that they would know Scotty Scheffler today, or Jordan Spieth, or Justin Thomas. But when I said your name, and they said, "Well, why would you have a guy that's a power lifter, and who's Stu McGill, and why would that be important?" But somebody who has been to your level, elite in the world, first of all, I tell them, someone that's been to that level, the amount of all the parts of the rest of it somebody needs. First of all, for a golfer that wants to get better, you know the fundamentals on being an athlete and getting better, whether somebody's a 20 handicap and they don't think they're athletic or not, or they're a world-class player. But obviously your work with Stu and knowing the McGill method, your whole background, your story, which I want to get into definitely today because it's a fabulous story and fantastic ending, end to a chapter of a lifelong book. But your expertise is phenomenal, given your experience and what you've gone through. So you have a lot of empathy for the people that you work with, and I'm speaking from experience. That just when we met a few weeks ago, just talking to you and your understanding of somebody who's gone through the debilitating pain and didn't know where to go, and for years, and you think that you're lost and you don't have an avenue and you almost want to give up. So once I tell people that, they're like, "Holy shit! I cannot wait to hear what Brian has to say." And then one of your professional great achievements was setting world record. That becomes, as great as an accomplishment as that was, to people who are suffering, that becomes a secondary thing. And I want to hear this guy because he severely damaged his back. He broke it, and he came back and set a world record. This is unbelievable. I got to hear what he has to say. So when people ask who is Brian and why would you have a power lifter on, that's why, among other things. And I think you're a great dude, and I've only known you for a couple months. There's a lot of reasons why, but those are the ones that are appealing to golfers, even though you're not a golfer, but you work with a lot of golfers at all skill levels.
Starts off with an interview and I get to know them and what their goals are. Then the goal is to get them pain free, regardless of what the end goal is, because it doesn't matter if I can't get them pain free in their day to day life.
Mm-hmm.
Then we get a little bit more specialized depending on what they're trying to get back to doing, whether it be fighting or golf or just trying to live a week. They can't remember a week without pain. So that's the goal. Then we tailor it towards their goal to get back to swinging again. And then I turn it over to someone that is a little bit better than me when it comes to the swing and the mechanics of the swing and all that. But generally, getting someone pain free, they rush it. So I'm there to help them not go right back to hitting 500 balls a day. It's like, okay, take a couple swings. How do you feel? Give it a few days, follow back up with me. And then if it's hurting, it's too early. If that same familiar pain is coming back on, it's too early to be swinging the club. So sometimes people have to take a few months off from swinging the club and then get back into doing it slowly to build capacity with that particular stimuli and rebuild. So no matter who the person is, we assess their demands. We help rebuild them, remove the cause, build more capacity. Some people can't get back to doing what they want to do, unfortunately. Some people can't get pain free. There's a lot of people out there that are just kind of in a bad spot, and not everyone can be fixed. But the majority of people out there that aren't badly damaged from a severe car accident or deformed or cancer or some type of ugly cyst or something, if they have cumulative wear and tear, a lot of these people are causing their back pain over and over and over with their movements, with their training programs, with the frequency and intensity and exercise choice. So I go in and help them cool down for a little bit of time. And a lot of these people are fixable. They just got to give the rebuild for the right amount of time. People think day one, I hurt a little bit. Day 7, I feel a little bit better. Day 8, I'm going to hit 100 balls. And it just continues over and over and over and over. So a lot of the time, I just have to be a voice of reason and say, stop swinging the club for 2 months, 3 months. Stop, rebuild, get through the day pain-free before you worry about going to the golf course. And so that's where I come in. And as I say, I'll turn it over to someone that knows the swing better than me when they're pain-free and can swing pain-free. Then you guys figure out adjustments and all that good stuff. I've done my job to help get you back pain-free. You figure out those details. And that's, yeah, cool. Fireworks.
I don't know where that came from, but it's pretty interesting.
Yeah, this MacBook stuff does this with it's watching every camera move. It does it with FaceTime, with Google Meet, and now with this particular app. If you do a thumbs up or you do like a celebration thing, it'll give you props. I guess it felt that I'd had like a mic drop there or something. I don't know, but yeah, that's kind of what I do.
You know, one thing that's very interesting to me that I appreciated, and I'm sure anyone that you work with and anyone who follows Doc Stu McGill will know how they develop this part of the program, but it's right in the beginning, and your all's assessment is 3 to 4 hours long. So
Yep.
can you get in for anyone out there who says, wow, why would you do that? Or why would it be so long? Whether there's somebody who's just suffering from pain, or they're a golfer, they want to get back to playing, or they're a trainer, medical practitioner, what have you, that are tuning in. Why is it a necessity to spend so much time with somebody?
Well, one of the biggest reasons why people don't get better, and I just clicked off of you and lost you. Sorry about that. Where are you? Where are you? There we go. We need time because the typical person well, let me back up. The typical person that I see doesn't hurt their back on Monday and Tuesday call me up and say, hey, I want to come see you. I tweaked my back putting groceries in the truck the other day. The people that we see find us because they've failed a dozen times with physical therapy, chiropractic, injections, pills, stretches, blah, 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 blah. So by the time they get to us, we have to do it differently. We have to look at everything. And so it starts with an interview. Who are you? Where are you going? What are your goals? And then we understand what kind of personality we're dealing with. Are we dealing with someone that if you tell them to do 5, they'll do 10? Or are we dealing with someone you tell them to do 5, they'll do 1? So it's a complete top to bottom, far beyond just a biomechanical assessment. It's every bit of the psychological, where they live. Like if you're prescribing someone to do daily walks and they live in the hood, they're not going to go for a walk because they're going to get robbed, right?
Mm-hmm.
So you have to understand this person and the life that they live. Then you do the full physical assessment. So it starts with, it's a lot of, it's almost like a counseling session. You understand who this person is, you interview them. And doctors don't do this for a number of reasons. Number one, they don't know the right questions to ask for the assessment when it comes to back pain. And the biggest reason they're not encouraged to ask these questions and learn about an assessment is because they don't have a billing code for counseling. So it's not going to benefit them to sit down with you for an hour or two. They don't have the time, they don't have the knowledge. So they're going to just shoot it out of a cannon, 15 minutes, say what they think, and then escalate you on to somewhere else. So we have to be completely different. It starts with an interview, and then it goes to the physical assessment to understand postures, loads, movements, nuances that cause pain. And then once we figure out what causes this person pain, of course, we look at their training program and all these different things. But once we understand the commonalities of what causes their pain, then we try to figure out what they can do pain-free. Then we workshop these things to move around the pain in their daily life and in their training program, make adjustments to those things, and then give them a healing prognosis, thoughts projecting forward on a return to sport, and then a program to follow and make adjustments as necessary going forward. And to go over someone's movements, postures, and loads in the interview, you need a few hours to be able to do it appropriately. Some may be over in 2 hours. Some people just don't have too much to say. They're not someone that needs to be listened to. Other people, no one's listened to their backstory for 15 years. No one's ever sat down with them and said, how are you doing with this? What have you tried? How are you doing mentally? Like, are you on the edge? Are you doing okay? And I don't just come out and ask them that, but you can see in their eyes, a lot of them, man, they're toast. They're done. And this is the last resort. If you can't fix them, then, who knows what they may decide to do. So we absolutely have to be different in every way we approach it. It has to be more thorough, more detailed. And that's how we have, pretty good success rates. We can't guarantee success because at the end of the day, you have to do the work. I can only help you and give you my thoughts. You have to execute. We have to have program adherence. We need to have a little bit of genetics on their side too, and then a little bit of luck. All those things kind of play a part there. And a lot of the time, people can get significantly better if they give it time, but it isn't going to be a magical fix. Some people, it may seem like one because they're causing their pain with their slouch sitting all the time. And you tell them to sit up, and they're like, oh, this doesn't hurt at all. I just don't feel like doing this at all. Well, if they decide they don't want to do that and you've shown them the antidote, that's what I mean by you can't fix it for them. I've seen probably a dozen people that I can name that I thought they were completely fixable. They didn't want to give it the time, and they went and did their own thing. And to this day, they're still hurt. I can't go in and say, hey, I'm not going to be there with them on the couch and say, hey, man, you're sagging. Hey, the way you picked that up. Hey, you shouldn't go play pickleball. Speaking of which, that's the new herd of clients that I'm seeing right now. It's golfers, powerlifters, fighters, and then recently it's pickleball. People that haven't been doing things
Which
in
one of these
15,
four doesn't
20
fit?
years. Yeah, they go out and they get obsessed with pickleball, and they bang their neck up, they bang their hips up, they fall down, they're twisting and doing all this stuff that they haven't done in a while, and they end up blowing their back apart. And so each person we treat individually. We do a full assessment, and we treat everyone equally, whether they're the best golfer in the world currently, or they're just a guy that heard from you that lives down the street that's never heard of you before, that just wants to get better and pick their kid up out of the crib. We treat everyone the same, but each assessment is unique. A lot of them are a lot more psychosocial, with, of course, the biomechanics. Then other ones are a lot more biomechanical, and they have just pure movement flaws that are causing their pain, training program errors, and then we have to go in and kind of intervene sometimes with that. But they're unique, and we have to be ready for just about anything.
Do you find that more people come in that they have a pre-existing condition for whatever reason, car accident, they herniated something, or maybe it's a minor herniation many years ago that's just nagging? Or do you come in and find that people just through their daily movements are irritating their back and their spine? Is there one or the other, or is it equal? Is it skewed one way?
It just depends on the time. I'll have a lot that they'll do one thing and then they're never the same again. But probably the more common is the cumulative. They may have had a tweak 5 years ago and they're down for a little bit, and then they retweaked it again, and then they're down for even longer. And then next thing you know, they're looking at trying to do a surgery or something like that when it's been cumulatively building. They have pain on multiple levels, and a surgery isn't likely going to be their fix. Now, someone that's involved in a tragic car accident or a fall where they become completely structurally compromised, then that's when they might need a fusion or some kind of intervention because they're crushed, they're out of whack. They might be slipped forward in a really bad spondy after a fall or something like that, and they have to get a surgical remedy. But even for those out there that have to get a back surgery, you still have to rebuild. So try what we call as a virtual surgery before you even go to get the surgery. Chill out for a couple weeks and stop doing a program, whatever it may be, whether it's a cookie cutter from the PT, or maybe you've read Back Mechanic by Dr. McGill and you haven't been able to quite wind your pain down. You might be doing too much. Shut it down for a couple days, rest like you would if you just had a surgery, and then get into a walking program as described in Back Mechanic and Gift of Injury, then slowly start rebuilding. But what you don't do is go from virtual surgery right back to swinging 100 wedge swings, drive 100 balls. You can't go right back to doing that. And in my opinion, and I'll go back to the powerlifting analogy because that's my home base, that's my
Mm-hmm.
wheelhouse. But it parallels to everything else out there, every other sport. You see powerlifters out there as well as golfers. They feel better after a little bit of time, and they don't correct their movement flaws, their program flaws, and they go right back to doing the thing that hurts them, and they recreate the injury, and it keeps happening over and over again. The key during this time is building more pain-free capacity after the virtual surgery and using specialized exercises to build up the deficits that they have, eliminate their weak points, and then get back to doing what it is they love after a period of time. Some people need to take a year off. Some people need to take 6 months off. I can't say how long. It depends on the nature of the injury and their goal. But powerlifters, they feel better. They get right back onto the bar and blow themselves apart. And the same thing happens with golfers.
Yeah, it must be that addiction. You get used to that drive, especially once you get into people who either are very, very determined to get healthy again and they're hard drivers, or they're at a very elite level or close to it. That you don't get to that level without pushing yourself. And the thing for myself that I learned as I tweaked myself enough in the weight room was, for me, when I was a teenager, I played a lot of sports. So if I wasn't playing sports, I didn't do much of my homework. I'd sit there lay on the sofa and watch sports on TV. I was very much an athlete, as many do. They play their sport and then they don't want to do anything else aside from that. Your 20s, you kind of learn how to push yourself.
Yep.
You're taught that, hey, you can push beyond what you think you can do. By the time you're in your 30s, you're usually pushing too hard that you might have hurt yourself, usually in a gym for golfers, because golfers are not very big to begin with. They're usually slight of build, or they would be in another sport. So they get in the gym, and it's the first time they've ever seen some size and results. And I've seen this many, many, many times with a lot of fellow players or people I teach, that they get in the gym and they want to push it, which is part of their DNA. And then they either hurt themselves. And then as you get in your late 30s and 40s, you're like, okay, I need to learn how to slowly push and back off, and then slowly push a little bit and back off, which is, unfortunately, you wish that more coaches would understand that earlier and try to get their younger players across the board, the spectrum of sport, to push it and then back off and push and back off. I think when you and I were younger, when you had designated seasons, maybe I grew up in Michigan, you had designated seasons. Maybe Jacksonville, you guys could play baseball all year long if you wanted to.
Yeah, we did actually. Yeah.
Yeah, I'd have to imagine you did have off seasons in between at some point that allowed you to recover. You weren't overuse injuries, but in today's world, that's completely changed. Everyone wants to specialize from a young age. The parents want them to specialize, even though all the data shows that you need until you're a late teen to play as many sports as you can.
When I was playing baseball in high school, it frustrates me looking back because I agree exactly with what you're saying about specialization. Kids should be wrestling, football, baseball, whatever it is that keep them in shape, keep them out of trouble. And in particular, our baseball coach had no crossover. So he had some really good athletes that played baseball, but none of them were allowed to wrestle or play football or anything. And so the football team was hurt, the baseball team was hurt. It was just it was BS. It shouldn't be like that, where the baseball coach can usurp power and say, no, you can't play football, because who knows what can happen when you have the running help from track, right? You do track and
Mm-hmm.
field in the off season, you sprint, running mechanics, and just working on pure speed. And then you go into the baseball season, you might drop your 60 time down, a couple tenths of a second. I've seen it happen. Wrestling make you more mentally tough to play baseball and to grind through and all that. Not that wrestling physically is going to make you better. It may keep you in shape, but unfortunately, that was my high school experience. One sport, and that was baseball. And yeah, there was no crossover between players. Now, going back to something you said about growing up in Michigan, have you ever seen baseball played in the snow before? Ever?
Just when someone was drunk.
How? Yeah, I wonder why that's never been a thing even up in Michigan. I was wondering how that would go. I was up in Ohio coming back not long ago, and I drove by a baseball field that was frozen. And I'm thinking, you know what? I've never seen anyone try to play baseball in the snow. Of course, you play football in the
Mm-hmm.
snow, blizzard or whatever. But yeah, baseball would be pretty tricky to play in the snow, wouldn't it?
Well, I tell you what was difficult is I was a teenager. By the time I was in high school, I put baseball aside because I'd gone into golf, and it is different. Well, they're same seasons, which was one thing, and then it was my batting swing would always throw off my golf swing for at least 6 weeks. But the hard part about early spring training in Michigan, usually this time of year, was we would do it in the gym, and when the coach is hitting hot ground balls to you off a wooden floor, that ball's not slowing down like it does off of dirt or grass.
Right.
That thing would come in blazing, and you're just trying to get your coordination back. You're coming off basketball season for a lot of us, and now you're getting into using your hands more, and it's damn, that ball's coming in fast, and you did not want to get hit because that bounced off the floor and hit you in the chest. It really hurt because it didn't lose much velocity off that wooden floor in the gymnasium.
Yeah, I was actually at the playground yesterday. Not for me. I don't do parkour or anything, but I was with my daughters, and they were playing on the playground. And I look over. There's two baseball fields. There's a baseball field that's far, and there's one that's close. I walk over to the one that's far with my girls. I didn't know there was such a thing as slow pitch boys softball at 10 to 12 years old.
Hmm.
They're playing with the softball, throwing underhand slow pitch. And I'm like, man, I was hitting off kids throwing 60 miles an hour by the time I was 10 years old. What the hell is going on here? But then you had the other field of kids that were 3 years younger playing pitcher, overhand baseball.
Regular little league, what we would consider
Yeah,
normal
so
little league.
things are, I guess we can surmise that things are a lot different now than at least when I was in school in the 90s, and you in what, the 70s or 60s, you're in high school.
Not quite that old. The gray and the white and the beard really throws it off.
Man, I don't want to brag, but I don't have any gray yet. But dude, it's coming.
It comes on
I
quick
know it.
when it
I
comes.
found one the other day and I yanked it out real quick. But things are a lot different. And going back to something you mentioned is interesting. Golfers in high school, they're generally not your most athletic person. They're playing
Mm-mm.
basketball or football, baseball, wrestling. They're being highly recruited. So that leaves someone like Tiger, that I think he's pretty athletic, and but uh what word am I, not brood, but he was you know what word am I looking for? I went blank.
Raised or conditioned.
I'm thinking almost like a farm animal, dude. He was just like invested in and great, like he was just raised to be a freaking golfer from when he was this tall. I'm sure he could have played other sports.
He did. I'm almost certain. I have a lot of friends who are friends of Tiger's, and like
Uh-huh.
1 degree separation. And I'm almost certain, I'm pretty sure he ran track, and I think he played baseball in Little League for a little while. So he as much as golf obviously was his focus,
Yeah.
but he did take some time away for other sports where he was very good at sprinting, if I'm not mistaken. He was a good sprinter. So he always had that fast twitch that, obviously his swing speed when he came out, he was arguably the longest hitter on tour by quite a bit. But golf was the focus. You don't get to be that level without having a focus on that from a young age. I don't think.
No, he's special, and you know, going back to the golf thing and Tiger, the amount of hard work it takes to be able to hit a golf ball straight and do it over and over. I have a little bit of bias because I played baseball, and there's debate out there. What's harder, to hit the ball consistently off the tee or from a pitcher's hand that's moving 100 miles an hour, 5
Mm-hmm.
different directions? I think, being that I played baseball and played at a pretty decent level, had years that I played where I had 0 strikeouts, I always just slapped the ball all over the place. Still, I know how hard it is for these pro golfers to hit it straight sometimes, or not, shank one every once in a while. I think it's the hardest thing to do in sports, and that's coming from someone who hit, fastballs and curveballs and fastballs with movement and 85-mile-an-hour curveballs and stuff. It's almost impossible to hit. To hit it straight and hit it like they do is, unless you've been around it, you don't understand how hard it is. And I can't do it. I've never even tried to do it because I played baseball. But to me, I agree that with the people that have the stance of, those are the 2 hardest things to do in sports: hit 350 and drive consistently in the middle of the fairway.
Mm-hmm. The one thing I want to ask you about that, people who watch your videos and on your YouTube channel, and I always have links to that. So in the summary, we'll have links to all your sites and everything else, and in your books and everything. But one thing that you talk about quite a bit, and Dr. McGill talks about, is spinal hygiene, and you touched on it a little bit. For somebody out there who's wondering what spinal hygiene is, no, it's not getting in the shower and scrubbing your back with a back washer, but it's much more detailed than that, and it deals with what had gotten into a little bit on day-to-day movements, picking the scab, as y'all like to call it. Can you explain a little more what spinal hygiene is and why it's so important?
When people get hurt, pain corrupts good movement patterns. And it's not always the case, but in many cases, the person that comes to see me, or just say the back pain person, they move in ways that are almost seemingly deliberately causing their pain. And once you point it out to them, to clean it up, whether someone doesn't do well with a slumped spine or lateral flexion or extension, when you teach them to deviate towards neutral, you're giving them the power to control, in a lot of cases, their pain and how bad it gets. So spine hygiene is observing what causes one's pain and then cleaning up your movement in ways that help facilitate healing, but don't pick the scab. So we have different variations of movement we teach depending on the person and what causes their pain. We'll have them do a variation of a squat to grab something a little bit more substantial, neutral spine, stiffened up with the obliques pushed out laterally, the pecs pulled down, the lats pulled down, going down to shortstop squat or posting a bit, and using the hips to brush your teeth. Go down to lift the toilet seat up, and using the squat pattern, which is a very natural and good pattern for the back, and using the hips instead of the lumbar, the thoracic spine to have your movement, which cumulatively, like we talked about a little while ago, that's a big reason why I see people. It's cumulative bad movement combined with an accident in the gym, and then bam, you got a full-blown couple layers of levels of disc bulge and facet, arthritis and such. But spine hygiene is using the squat and the lunge and the stop twist and the one leg golfer's pickup to go about your day and build capacity.
So what would be for? I'll put you on the spot as a wordsmith since you're an author. Um, can you describe, as somebody's listening, if they're likely driving right now, what a fundamentally good squat is in your system? because most people cannot squat properly, and they do get that rounded lower back, which goes back to picking the scab is making the same bad movements repetitively in that. So you're trying to implement all these good things in your daily routine, yet you go moving poorly, and then it picks the scab of the good things that you just did. So,
Yeah,
but
so
can you describe what a good fundamental squat is?
it'll be about feet shoulder width apart. The toes may be angled out slightly, gripping the floor. So it all starts with the foundation of rooted into the floor and a good, nice foundation. So making sure the movement starts with the hips and doesn't go through the back. It starts with the hips, and then the knees start to bend, and you externally rotate the femurs if necessary. Basically, just sliding the hips back and keeping the back flat, the head, neck, and sternum locked in as one, and having a neutral spine. Each person's curvature of their back is going to be unique. We want to maintain that for resilience. We don't want to change. If someone has a big lordotic curve and they have, like, a bit of a bikini model build, as it may seem, we don't want to get them to flatten their back out, because that's going to cause all kinds of problems. So maintaining that neutral um, position, stiffening the musculature of the core. And when I say core, I want the listeners out there to think of everything from below the chin to the testicles, basically. 360 degrees, right? You like
Mm-hmm.
that word, right? Or number, right?
Yes.
360. And it's the pecs, it's the lats, it's the rhomboids, it's everything locking in, not as hard as you can, but tune stiffness with the squats. So you're stiffing your obliques out laterally, you slide your hands down your thighs to post on your knees. And that position, like you're going down to wash your face at a vanity or brush your teeth, that position for most people, even with a complicated back issue, is going to be remotely pain free, moderately pain free for them, significantly more than just bending over, because that is the most common mechanism of pain in people that I see, just kind of across the board. It isn't everybody, but flexion is bending forward plus the compression of your body weight, or something out in front of you, right? The further out
Mm-hmm.
in front of you, the longer the moment arm, the more shear, and then compression. Flexion plus compression is the most common reason why I see people for back pain, and that's disc bulge 101. That's the way a lot of them are created. But there's infinite ways to create a disc bulge, from a tragic car accident to the way you pick your kid up out of the crib for 100 days in a row. It could be cumulative, it could be something in between. But by moving in ways like using the squat to pick your kid up out of the crib, or to slide your hands down your thighs to do the posting, you're putting dollars in your bank account. You're putting your dollars in your bank account day by day to be able to go and swing the clubs again, to be able to go and squat again one day, hopefully. And what people aren't realizing is this is something you do all day, every day. You move, you sit, you bend, you twist, 168 hours in a week. You may train, let's say, the most insane golfer out there in the weight room. Let's say they train 20 hours a week in the weight room, which is probably
Mm-hmm.
too much, but whatever, it's personally dependent. What about the other 148 hours of the week? Are they putting dollars in their bank account? Or are they withdrawing constantly and not even knowing it by sitting for too long, the way they bend, or the way they squat, or lack of squatting? Um, they might be just burning that account up and not even know it. So the spine hygiene, starting with the squat and then the lunge, either a reverse lunge or a forward lunge. And then everyone out there hopefully knows what the golfer's pickup is. The golfer's pickup being the way you pick up after hopefully you drop the ball in the hole after a putt, and hopefully you're under par at that point, right?
That's right. That would go in line. So spinal hygiene would be outside the assessment, would be the first step in the healing process, or let's say the assessment, taking time off. But taking time off coincides with spine hygiene. But
Yep.
so true healing would be overlapping that, and then the next step. So can you kind of describe what true healing is?
True healing. So we gave a few examples of the common golfer or powerlifter that feels better. That doesn't mean they're healed. Pain free doesn't mean healed. It just means The sensitivity of the tissue has wound down where it no longer hurts. It doesn't mean it's ready to bear load or take rotation for 100 times or a 500-pound squat. It's important to understand that adapting a disc bulge, or in particular, there's a lot of golfers that have annular tears. An annular tear is sometimes caused by twisting. A lot of time it's caused by twisting and compression. And basically, you have the annulus of the disc. And I don't have my disc model with me, but I promise the next time we do this, I'll have my disc model. But if you think about an intervertebral disc, it's layers of collagen, and in the middle of that is the nucleus. It's a gel-like substance. When the disc is stressed, the layers of collagen tend to delaminate, and basically they become loose, and the nucleus will work its way through the collagen fibers and then hit the canal, and it creates an inflammatory response. It may push on a nerve. It can cause all kinds of stuff. And for someone to do this, it's usually a cumulative thing. In particular, an annular tear is a lot of the time golfers, tennis players, those types of people with a lot of rotation, cricket players, but what the hell is cricket anyway, right? I don't really know much about cricket. Baseball players, another one, annular tears, right? These take a long time to heal, and this specific type of disc bulge with the tear takes a significant amount of time to heal because it's so dependent on your movement. So this person that has an annular tear or a variation of a disc bulge, just because they feel good 5 weeks after treatment or being diagnosed doesn't mean that they're healed. It might take years after that for the disc to actually gristle, stiffen, and kind of turn into the outer part that's in the canal, kind of turns into like a crab meat-like material. And then it gets hard. It may be absorbed by the body or broke down, or some people get lucky and it vacuums back in just by neutral spine, maybe a tummy lie or something. And we could talk about positions of respite in back mechanic and gift of injury. But sometimes it takes a couple of years for that disc to be able to bear adequate load again, depending on what the demands of the sport or the job might be. Other people seemingly can get back to doing what they're doing in a couple of months, but their injury is unique. Their demands may be unique, so you can't compare other people's injuries to your injury because you have a unique body with unique injury mechanisms and most likely unique goals. The healing process, leaving it alone and not picking the scab, and then having time in between getting pain-free and where you want to be, back on the course, having time in the gym with good spine hygiene, specialized assistance movements and exercises that are going to bolster and build upon that pain-free capacity you have now, and you flesh it out with special exercises. You typically don't go back to the cause of pain for a while. An example, swinging the golf club. But you might start doing some anti-rotation stuff with a powerlift press, a suitcase carry, those types of things. And then you get back to doing what it is that you love to do over a period of time, and you mind the rate of healing. And it's gonna be slow. It's gonna be slow, especially if someone's been dealing with an injury for a significant amount of time. It might be a year or two before they're back to form. Other people are back in about 6 months. I needed it right around 18 months with the type of injury that I had. I tried to do it in 10 months. It didn't work out so well, and people can read about that in Gift of Injury, but I was pain-free. It did not mean I was healed, and I had a relapse about 10 months into my program. So it's a good thing that happened because I learned so much during this process. And Dr. McGill and I, while doing an interview recently, we saw a patient and did an interview. He said, "Brian, I thought you did come back too quick. I believe I warned you," which he did. He didn't say, "Don't do that. Don't be stupid," but you're rushing it. You're rushing it, Brian. I knew I was rushing it. I wanted to get back in 10 months. The Arnold is every year around March. I saw Dr. McGill in May. I wanted to do the next Arnold the next year, and I wasn't ready for it. He said, "Brian, we call the book Gift of Injury because it was a gift that kept on giving. I kept learning from that injury, even though the initial meeting with McGill in 2013 that people have seen on YouTube over the last 11 years,
Mm-hmm.
I still had a lot to learn over that 18 months besides what I learned from him that day. I needed 18 months, and really, I needed 11 years to this day to kind of understand what the hell happened, how I can help other people, and that you can't rush biology. You got to create the adaptations and then rest. So there's no way to rush that. And depending on what type of tissue is damaged and the cascade of damage, that's how long someone will need. And it's generally not going to be just a couple of weeks or a couple of months. Yeah.
Did you find out, because as you know, I had some outpatient minor surgeries, skin stuff, removal, and as my girlfriend was putting the antibiotic cream on today, she said, "I can't believe how fast this is healing compared to what it was 5 days ago." And it got me to thinking, as we had this scheduled for today, and as you were in the elite level as far as athletes. I mean, you're world record holder. It doesn't get any more elite than that. Did you find out through your injury that there was anything as far as diet, nutrition, supplementation, hydration that allowed you to speed up the healing process? Meaning, obviously, we know the extremes. If you eat vegetables, lean protein, fruits, drink enough water, that you're going to have the best probability. And if you eat McDonald's or Wendy's or any fast food, your likelihood of healing faster is going to maybe be delayed, or at least most of us would say. I'm sure Lane Norton would probably argue that point, or could. But did you find out anything like that to where your diet is somebody who is at your level, and I'm sure diet was a focal point or a very large part of what you did? Was there anything that aided in your recovery, or was it
Yes.
something that y'all weren't measuring really?
Yes and no. And to the final part of the question, we weren't measuring that aspect of it, but I was, according to my body weight. And I'll tie all that together in a second. But, you know, talking about the Wendy's diet or whatever, of course, it's going to be inflammatory. And there's intangibles with that. You know, if you're on the toilet all the time, that's not going to be good. You're not likely getting the absorption of the nutrients if it's going right through
Mm-hmm.
you, right? But I I tried everything before I saw Dr. McGill. I tried all kinds of gray market supplementations, and you know, am I allowed to say the word drug on here? Are we gonna get dinged for that? I
My
tried all
show.
kinds
Say
of
anything you
stuff,
want to.
legal, quasi legal, illegal, all those things, and they didn't really do too much. I don't think that there's a supplement out there that can really help someone heal quicker. It's arguable about the stem cell treatments and stuff. I've had plenty of clients do PRP and stem cells over the
Mm-hmm.
years, and almost without fail, the ones that have done PRP are significantly worse for like 6 months afterward.
That's amazing.
Yeah, well, think about this for a minute. Let's say 3 of the clients I had that went and got PRP in Colorado, they
And
were
was this for
all
back?
dealing with what's that?
This was for back as well with the clients you had?
Yeah, so for the shoulder, for the hip, the knee, I think PRP and stem cells can be helpful. It's just we don't know about the back, and I haven't seen great results with especially with PRP or stem cells. And 3 of the people that went to Colorado for their back that came to me afterward, they had annular tears. They had fissures in their annulus as a whole. What I don't understand is how going in through that hole with the needle and shooting platelet rich plasma therapy in that hole, causing a further hole or maybe a new hole, is going to help them accomplish what they're trying to do. I don't think they know or understand putting another hole in an annular tear to begin with is probably not wise.
Mm-hmm.
So these people end up a bit worse for about 6 months because of that. They might have 2 annular tears now, and then they have pain on the other side now. So the PRP and stem cells for other joints might be helpful. I haven't seen it for the back. Now, diet. I think that eating a clean and non-inflammatory diet can be helpful. Most importantly, though, if someone is compressive force intolerant, they don't tolerate compression well. Basically, they are to grab their stool if they're sitting down in their chair and pull straight down, and they don't like that, and they have back pain, and that promotes the same back pain that bothers them. Compression isn't going to be good for them. Dropping some body weight and modifying their diet might be a godsend for them. But if they're unstable, let's say they're a skinnier person, like a lot of the golfers are going to be slender and such.
Mm-hmm.
If they have a wonky, unstable spine, gaining weight and building that corset around it, whether it's just a little bit of adipose tissue and some muscle bracing and stiffening, that person's pain can be taken away just like that sometimes. Just like someone who is compression intolerant, they lose 20 pounds or maybe 10% of their body weight. That can make all the difference in the world and promote their healing. I had to do that as the final straw for my healing. The last little unturned stone that I had to go with was dropping 10% of my body weight because compression wasn't my friend. I was fighting a war with compression to be able to squat 1100 plus, bench 800 plus, deadlift 800 plus, but also compression of gravity every day, just being 300 pounds. So that was the last thing in 2014 when I failed at the Arnold, coming back after 10 months. I had to address my diet. I dropped 30 pounds right at 10%. And then it was no looking back after that. That's what helped me have the capacity to be able to tolerate the demands of the sport, to squat, the bench, the deadlift. And that was what I needed to do, drop a little bit of weight.
You know, golfers are very familiar with planes, plane of the swing, plane of the club, the shoulders, the body lines, and things like that, especially as technology in the last 10 years or so has really come on the scene, and the ability to draw lines and show them what's happening and what needs to happen. But training, and some of them who have trained for quite some time, particularly collegiate golfers and or somebody who's a club golfer, weekend golfer, but they work out and they have some understanding of the body. And they're told that in order to train, if you had an injury, particularly your back, as we're talking about backs and golf, that you need to train in all different planes in order for you to be stable when you play golf. Yet that doesn't always seem to be the best thing as we're talking about load and compression and things like that. So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, so we talked about with the assessment, we assess the demands of the sport, and the particular athlete and their pain generators and whatnot. I think that training various ways in the gym for, let's say, a golfer can be helpful. The problem comes when you try to turn them into a power lifter or a gymnast or something like that, where, for example, we talked about this before, golfers squatting ass to grass. For
Mm-hmm.
what? You got a guy that can stand to win $1 million in 5 months. Why are you worried about them sitting their butt on the ground when playing, their butt never comes below? How many degrees would you say?
Yeah, I would say Alex Ehlert, who we talked about that came on, who researches this, said golfers don't need to do much more than a quarter, maybe half a squat. So what is that, 30 to 45 degrees
Yeah,
femur angle on the descent, on the eccentric loading?
yeah. It isn't necessary because they're never going to do that and with their demands of their sport. So instead of optimizing that athlete, working in that plane with that amount of uh, hip flexion and extension or whatever it may be in rotation, um, you might ruin this person's back by having them squat heavy and deep. And that's where the form tends to degrade. Not everyone's built to squat their butt on the ground. And if you have a strength coach that's blindly had success by treating them like a power lifter, like there's many people out there whose careers have been ruined because they got with the wrong strength coach who tried to turn them into a power lifter and annihilated their knees and their back, unfortunately. Um, it's important to keep what's important, and that's the way they hit the golf ball, and not what they're lifting in the gym. At the same time, um, some variations of squatting and such are good, but going more than a half squat or so, or a quarter squat for a golfer, for an American football player, you got to look at the risk reward for that.
Mm-hmm.
And all the studies show, not just the one you're mentioning, but the studies for leg development show that the half squat is far more superior for quadricep development than a full squat all the way to the ground, because you have the rebound, the recoil, and the bounce out of the bottom. Whereas you go down, and to come up out of the hole, you got to grind those legs and drive through the floor. So completely agree that golfers should not be squatting super deep, not more than definitely not below 90 degrees in my opinion, parallel to the floor. Most should be higher than that. But depending on the golfer, if they're lacking strength, a squat or a variation of the deadlift can be helpful. I would not have them pulling off the floor like a lot of coaches have them pull. A variation like a trap bar deadlift just below the knee, a box squat that's that high above parallel with good form, and that's the key. It isn't just about the exercise selection. It's good form that's going to help carry over to the field. That's the thing, and availability supersedes ability. You know, your golfer hit a 315 bench press, but he blew his shoulder apart. Congratulations.
You're out. You're out for a long time, and you might not come back.
You may not. There's no guarantee. You might get pain free, but you may never have that swing just the way you need it. Might not be able to train for it the way you used to. So in the gym is super important to make sure that you have the strength coach, the team around you that knows what they're doing and understands the demands of your sport, and they're not just trying to show off in the gym about how strong you are.
You know, there's a fella, Scott Fawcett. I've had he has the decade system, and it's a course management system that shows you based off your shot patterning where your misses are on average. It gives you a cone of a miss, so you can plot your way around a golf course. So you might be aiming, for example, if there's a par 5 and there's water all down the left side, and there's trees on the right side of the fairway. If your average miss is 60 yards, you're going to put the left side of your cone on the left side of the fairway so you don't hit it in the water. And your right side of the cone obviously would be the right. So you might be aiming at the trees according to that system. But what it is, it's a loss mitigation system that allows you to play your best and that you didn't take chances. It numerically quantifies the course management. I wish somebody would come up with that in the weight training or in the weight room. I was listening to Dr. Mike Israetel. He's in your field, and I guess he's worked at the Olympic Center in Denver as a consultant. I don't know if you know who he is or not. I just started following. Yes.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
I just started.
Not well, but I saw him in Swiss this past year, and I've known him off and on, 15, 16 years probably.
I started following him this year, and as somebody who's over 50 now, and as I was training before I met you and trying to figure out what to do and what not to do, and he was explaining, and I'm just bringing this up as a relationship for people who understand the decade system because it's very good and Scott's very well known, and training, and it's like when you're in your 20s, if you bench press, if you hit 305 and you want to try for 350. Go ahead and try it, because the chance of you getting hurt with the soft tissue development is not, you have that pliability and you can try for that. If you're 50 years old and you just did 265, you're an idiot if you try to go over 300, because the chances of tearing a pec muscle, major, minor, you're out indefinitely, if not out forever. If you're 23 years old and you tweak something, okay, 3 months later, 6 months, maybe you're back in the gym, you're going to recover over your lifetime. But so I wish somebody was able to come up with something like that in the gym. For maybe they could even break it into different sports, but for golfers in particular, it's like, well, why are you deadlifting, trying to hit 350 or 400 when you're a golfer? I know the ground reaction forces can increase, but as you mentioned, what's the cost benefit of you blowing out a disc? And many golfers, Nota Begay was on, and Nota's career on the PGA Tour, he's come back now on the Champions Tour, but his career was basically ended because he was doing deadlifts. He felt he blew it out. I don't know, L4, L5, of course, where everybody does, doing a deadlift. And it's like, is it really worth it? He went into broadcasting, and he's pain free now after many years, and he can play golf, and he's even made some starts. But it's like, what could his career have been? Because he was a multiple time winner, played in the President's Cup, was on a great trajectory in his career, really coming into his own, and then all of a sudden it's lights out just like that. You're done for years. So it's like, can someone come up with that? And if they could, they'd be sipping drinks out of a glass with an umbrella in it down in the Caribbean for the rest of their life.
Yeah, yeah, that's interesting. Yeah, I don't know. I do know that until we have something like that, it's important with who you surround yourself with and who you entrust with your programming and the approach. And just because they have a big stable of athletes or lifters or players does not necessarily mean that they are the best coach. They might be the best marketer and advertiser, and that traps people sometimes. And I've seen it in every sport with that. And then they eventually people the word's out on them like, hey, he hurts everybody he works with. You're gonna
Mm-hmm.
have a good 2 years, but then you're done. That's where I come in and I see the program for the last 2 years, and I'm like, I mean, I hope you enjoyed it because you've blown yourself apart, and you're going to need the next 2 years to undo, if you're lucky, what you did the last 2 years with this training program. You know, you put a little bit of speed on your ball, a distance on your ball, but you annihilated your back in the process. So it's about knowing your science, knowing the demands of your sport, risk reward with everything that you do, and a little bit of luck and experience, man, is what it comes down to. I don't know everything. It comes to even powerlifting or strength training. Specifically, I don't know everything when it comes to golf and getting someone back out to playing golf again. I do know if you keep doing the same thing over and over and you keep getting hurt, it's time to make change. That's what I do know. And I take pride in being able to sort through someone's program to determine what I think might be causing it. And even if I can get them pain free, I hope and pray that they listen to me about my advice going forward about their program. The worst is when you get someone better, they're back to playing, and then get they go towards that shiny object or coach or new exercise. That's the worst thing. They see a new exercise on Instagram, they're like, "Oh, I'm trying this. It feels good," and then they're blown apart again. So that I guess I'm kind of sharing some of the growing pains that you have with athletes as you work with them, and it goes back to something you said a few minutes ago. The top athletes have gotten there for a reason. They're typically type A personalities, and they generally don't take critiquing and holding back very well. So that's when it's difficult to negotiate with the top athlete and get them to do less. And
Mm-hmm.
you got to do some psychology with it. Sometimes people are broken enough, even if they're a type A, to listen, and that's what actually happened to me. I tried everything on my own for years, and so finally I was exhausted. I went to see Dr. McGill in 2013, and I went in there and said, I'm going to come in here as a complete beginner. I don't know anything about training, anything about back health, especially. I'm going to listen to whatever he says, with the only contingency being I'm going to come back and lift again once I get pain free. And that I think that being broken like that, helped me be in a position where I was more likely to listen. Where maybe if I hadn't went through so much, I wouldn't have listened.
Yeah, I unfortunately I've been there, and it is not it's a very dark place. But as your book describes, the gift of injury, it is a gift that it as we as humans adapt. I think if you know, like if somebody loses their hearing, their eyesight gets better. That type of thing. One of the senses or the other senses improve when one is diminished or lost. I think that you almost have to 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 be put on your knees, both physically and mentally, and that you're willing to listen to somebody no matter what they say, because you almost don't have any other options. You know, and it's that listening, once you find the right person, that gets you out of pain, and then through that progression of, okay, how far can we get you? Can we get you back to the platform? Can we get you back to the first tee? Can we get you back on the field? And without that struggle, there's a lot of people, as you mentioned, especially athletes, who have overcome maybe a lot of times people telling them, you're not going to make this shot. You're not going to hit this shot. You're not going to win this tournament or this event. And they say, oh, yeah, watch me. And they find a way as an athlete to do it. And the more they have that, I found out very gifted golfers that I worked with. I'm sure you work with gifted powerlifters, that they're so used to doing things that other people can't, that when it comes down to listening to somebody, they really struggle with that until it comes to a point where they don't have a choice.
Yeah, and a lot of those guys, it's come easy to. They didn't have to work for some of those things that are suddenly
Mm-hmm.
taken away from them, and they don't they don't know how to get it back. And so sometimes they'll either dig in deeper and continue to flounder and just peter out and end up on the side of the road somewhere, or they'll humble themselves and say, I've tried everything. I need to try something different. Like what am I doing wrong? And a lot of the time it's everything they're doing wrong. If they can just shut it down for a little bit, they'll feel significantly better. Other times you got to go through it with a fine-tooth comb and go through every little detail, and sometimes just a little something not so obvious that's keeping them in pain. And that's why that you need the 3 hours for the assessment. Some people come to you and it's blatantly obvious after the first hour or two. You still want to come up with a hypothesis at the start to kind of get an idea of where you're going. But sometimes, depending on what you find, like when you and I worked together a couple weeks ago, we understand that you had some disc stuff going on, but how much of your pain was coming from your facet joints? Well, we have to test the facet joints to differentiate, is it the disc causing the pain or the facet? So it's one of those things that even with the assessment, sometimes that will change too as you go and you realize, man, I thought we were just dealing with this, but actually it's something that's going to take a lot longer than I suspected. Or we do a couple things and you have your best day that you've had in like 2 years at the house after I've been probing and prodding on you. I just change your posture a little bit and they're doing better. So everyone's so different with that. And so I guess what I'm saying is with the assessment, you still have to be open-minded as well, whatever that is.
Now, as we're talking about the Olympic style lifting in golf, there's two parts I want to get in. The first is there any amount of that type of lifting that is okay? So meaning maybe it's not good for every level of golfer. Maybe to not try to do 300 plus squat or crack 250 on a deadlift or 300 on a deadlift or whatever number it is. Is there a certain amount that is okay as far as the movement and building some strength and stability because it does work the core so much, and in some people's opinion it is a great developer of core strength?
Yeah, so you mentioned Olympic lifting. Did you mean powerlifting or Olympic lifting and powerlifting?
Well, we'll kind of stick to the two big ones that golfers have gravitated to over the last, say, 10 or 15 years that Tiger made very prominent, that getting in the weight room was very important. So we'll stick with the deadlift and the squat. Is there any level that it is somewhat advantageous for golfers to do those if it's just, let's say, a bar, or if it's up to 150 pounds total for each one or one or the other, or is it just better to stay away from those as far as golf is concerned? There's better bang for your buck, limiting the risk of injury and still making the muscles that are utilizing those lifts stronger and more applicable to the game.
If you were to give me a top golfer and I would design the perfect program for them, I would do everything I could, especially if we're talking about a multi-million-dollar athlete. I would do everything I could to protect that athlete and make them resilient in the gym. That would probably, in most cases, not include a barbell squat and a barbell deadlift. With that said, it doesn't mean that someone's going to blow apart just because they do those things. I would use a goblet squat instead with a kettlebell. Have them do variations of that. A squat max machine is a belt squat that I love, and there's 7-foot basketball players that use that, and they're not the ideal person to squat either, right? And they shouldn't be squatting low either. When does a basketball player set their ass on the ground? Only when they're getting up, and that's not good when they hit the ground because that's a long way down there, 7 foot. But when we squat them on the squat max, we'll do about a half squat with them, depending on what their hip can do. Maybe close to 70 degrees or 80 or 90 degrees, but we're not going ass to grass down like that. But I would rather them do a kettlebell squat on a squat max with a nice groove that's locked in for them than to gain 5% more in the weight room and risk the injury. The same thing with the deadlift. Do I have a problem with someone doing deadlifts? Have they been doing them for a long time? Do they have back pain? No. Well, let's make it as safe as possible for them, and let's make sure that they have the hip structure to be able to deadlift from that depth, right? Off of blocks most times I would have them do. And what's going to help them carry through and get their glutes involved and their obliques involved and um, their power tuned to where it needs to be. So instead of maybe a trap bar deadlift, I might have them do variations of suitcase deadlifts with the kettlebell instead of the barbell there. I guess I could parallel to the NFL weight rooms that I've worked in. Most of the good strength coaches have them squatting off a high box and deadlifting right at the knee height or just below, depending on the position. Linemen are going to be a little higher. Running backs maybe a little bit lower towards their mid shin or just below their knee. But with the trap bar, so it's nice and natural, and the risk for a bicep tear, shoulder issue with the bar in the back. We're not even talking about the back with the compression and the flexion and such. There's other things we keep in mind with those barbell lifts that may not be the best for a golfer or a tennis player, even a basketball player sometimes. So if someone's dead set on squatting and they don't have a back problem, I would modify it. I would try to steer them away from maybe not a back squat, maybe a front squat of variations, maybe a kettlebell, maybe a specialty bar, but just a straight up powerlifting squat, ass to grass, a deadlift off the floor with a straight bar. And the juice isn't worth the squeeze. You pull off a bicep, you're not playing golf for a long time. And why even put yourself in that position?
You are the second world-class expert that I've asked that to. The other was Dr. Richard Geyer from the Texas Back Institute, the famed, the disc replacement and surgeon. He said the same, that in his opinion, golfers should not be loading weight across a bar on the top of their shoulder, compressing their back any more than they need to, and the shearing forces on a deadlift of any amount of weight is going to run a higher risk of injury. So, I mean, here you guys, I've had two of the best in the world on, and they both agree the same thing as far as golf is concerned. Do not do these things, that you can do other adaptations to these exercises. Get just the same amount of benefit and significantly reduce the risk. Yet here we are seeing golfers of all ranges continue to do improper things and get injured. And it's like, how can trainers or therapists or other people not understand this, that you do these things, you're going to get hurt. Modify it, find somebody like you or someone who can show them this is what you need to do in order to protect your ability to play golf. If your number one goal is to play golf and get stronger and improve, then do this, because these things bring a lot of variables into play.
Yeah.
Not as far as those. The one thing that I don't think that a lot of people understand, trainers included, because I know a lot of trainers, and I would guess I was through just 3 decades of training and everything else, and working with all the different modalities that I have. I guess I would be a low handicap amateur when it comes to training and workout styles and things like that. And I've done a lot, and I've learned a lot from very many people. But one thing that I don't think that a lot of people understand, trainers included, is the strengthening component versus the pliability component. Pliability, for some out there who might not know, is your ability for it to move while being structurally sound. So the spine moves in different directions, but is it pliable that it can move and structurally sound with enough strength at the same time? Can you are the expert. I will not even attempt to try to explain those. I will let you do it, because you will do it much, much better. And people understand it better than me trying to talk about that.
Yeah, so what is it you're asking? You broke up there for a second.
The difference between strengthening the spine with some sort of, even the goblet squat or the suitcase carries, versus the pliability of the spine, and which one golfers are probably not aware that if they're going to try, if they're a young golfer and they can do squats or deadlifts, and they're not going to listen to what you have to say, and they're going to continue to do that, the spine gets stronger, but it gets less pliable in the process. So
yes. So
I don't think a lot of people understand that. So can you explain the strength versus the pliability, in particular for golfers?
Yeah, so a golfer is going to need to be limber enough, but be able to strike that ball just right. You're not going to stiffen them up like a power lifter. And so let's get more specific about the disc. The disc it's a tunable fabric, so it can be bendable and it can move well, or it can be stiffened. When you try to do both, it becomes poor at both. So when you're doing heavy axial load compression and heavy deadlifts where you're stiffening that disc up, it's not going to do so well with rotation. And that's why you see those golfers with annular tears from the compression, the delamination. Then you end up getting an open fissure or an annular tear from too much compression in the weight room and then way too much twisting, maybe in the weight room too. That's another problem with the golf and tennis and baseball is the twisting in the gym, heavy squat. You're just crushing that collagen in the disc. And then you go out and hit how many, God knows how many balls afterward.
Mm-hmm.
That's just a recipe of having an annular tear or a disc bulge. And then once the disc height starts to go, so you're compressing it. Powerlifters, you're going to compress your spine. That's natural. It's going to adapt to that. But then if you go out and start hitting golf balls 5 times a week, every week, you're going to annihilate your spine. So powerlifters develop compression tolerance, right? You don't want to be developing that compression tolerance as a golfer because it's going to make that cascade of degeneration, starting with the loss of disc height. And the next thing you know, you're loading that facet joint a lot more. And then you have a host of pain generating tissues there. So making a golfer too stiff where they can't rotate properly and strike the ball properly is something that I see a lot with people trying to train them like powerlifters.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if that's answering your question, but disc specific, you can tune it to be very stiff or very mobile, like a ballerina, baseball player, gymnast. You're going to have that rotational strength specifically, not for a ballerina or gymnast necessarily, but golfer, tennis player, baseball player. If you're doing a lot of compression, the disc is not going to adapt well to that. And then you're going to have, annular tears. And
Yeah, and I
that's going
think
to be a problem.
Dr. Stu kind of relates it to a thick branch versus a thinner branch, where the golfer needs to be the thinner branch, where they can move, the spine can move, but it can hold position. You can only move a thick branch so much before it breaks. So,
Yeah. So
and then, as you said, most people that are having, most trainers or golfers that are getting into the heavier lifts, I don't think they understand this concept. That's why I think it's so important that they hear someone like you explain it, because as you just mentioned, if you get into that powerlifting type stuff, you're compressing everything, and now you go out and you're going to hit 500 golf balls on a compressed disc. Now you're really, I mean, that's a recipe for a disaster. It's going to tear somewhere.
that's a recipe for just destroying your back. Heavy lifting compression and then rotate it and bend it a bunch and then do it all over again in training, rotating, hitting,
Mm-hmm.
and then eventually they wonder why they're blown apart. The willow branch and the oak tree. That's the analogy Dr. McGill uses, and it's so accurate for the way you depicted it. A powerlifter being an oak tree, stiffen, they're great. That they can take load. You load them up, they're great. But a willow branch, you load them up, they're going to wilt. But in a hurricane with the bending forces, right, the oak tree is going to snap and break. The willow branch is going to be fine. One bears load very well. The other can bend and move well. You try to get them to do both, and they're going to be poor at both of those things. And that's what I see happen with people that try to be a mobile power lifter. I see it on my side too. I see all this mobility and movement and stuff under load for power lifters. When are you doing that in powerlifting? When are you doing all this motion and stuff? No, you want to be rigid and stiff like an oak tree.
Mm-hmm.
You don't want to make a golfer stiff like that. You don't want their muscles to be stiff like that, and you sure don't want to develop their spine to be stiff like that, because that's going to cause all kinds of problems as well. So it's about tuning the athlete, and that's why we have the assessment to be able to understand, okay, this person's going to need to be able to move a little bit more than this power lifter who just moves in, squat, bench, and deadlift. This golfer has to be athletic to be able to not only drive the ball far, but be limber enough to be able to drop down and pick up their ball out of the hole after they finish that hole. And yeah, it's important to tune that athlete to not be a power lifter for sure.
Yeah, and I think for most golfers that is the challenge. Is as we talked earlier, most golfers are not playing football or baseball or basketball. They're not the bigger athletes. They're usually the smaller and or the thinner. And when you grow up with that, and I wasn't sure. I was obviously tall most of my life, but when I was a sophomore in high school, I was about 6'3", but I was 175 pounds. I was a beanpole.
Mm-hmm.
And I think I told you by the time I was a junior, I on the old racks, the universal machines, I had trouble bench pressing 130 pounds on the machine. So it's buried in your head for many, many years until you're in your 20s for some. I know myself, by the time I was in my mid to late 20s, I was finally putting up some what I call respectable weight, not knowing that was limiting, obviously, flexibility and mobility. But I look in the mirror and I can walk around after so many years of saying I couldn't do squat, or I couldn't, using a word, I couldn't do hardly anything. And now I'm able to do it. So as someone who's advising them, you're always fighting that. And it's something that I don't know if anybody can get through to them, because they've gone through sometimes a decade or more of being the skinny one. And even if you're small and skinny, now you got a double whammy, and then maybe you grow in it and you starting to get in the weight room. And I on whether it was fair or not, Tiger used to get compared to Urkel. When he first came out on tour, he was very skinny. I think Tiger's about 6'1". He was like 165 or 70 pounds when he first came out, and his shirts were all too big. And then,
Yeah.
He spent his whole life being somewhat smaller. And now he's out there and he's starting to fill in. Now he hits the weight room. I'm sure that played a role in, and I would have to imagine that some people who he was around said, hey, maybe back off on this. But you're dealing with 10, 20 years of somebody dealing with, but not, they're looking at their friends and they're saying, why can't I fill out like that? Why can't I can't even fill out this shirt? You know what I mean? And I think that's the mental part that even the best of the best can't not get through to some people at some times. And maybe you just have to wait for them to get hurt and not get hurt too bad. And then they're going to go through that pain as you and I did. And then they're going to say, you tell me what I need to do, and I am going to do it to a T.
Yeah, I was actually going to mention Tiger just by the things that have been very public about, surrounding, let's say 2005 era when all the Balco stuff was going on and the Canadian doctor stuff was going on.
Mm-hmm.
I think that's probably a lot to blame for why golfers thought they needed to bulk up, because when he all of a sudden started getting thicker and had pecs and shoulders, and he was still playing very well at that time, very, very well during that
Mm-hmm.
time. If my memory serves me correctly, this is all just stuff I've seen in the media. It's not behind the scenes stuff, so I'm only talking about public stuff. I believe he continued to play very well until the whole Madame list stuff came out, and then that's
Yeah.
when his life kind of derailed for a little bit, and then the injuries started to mount after that. But I would venture to guess that Tiger really getting after it, filling out a lot, people looked at that and said, man, look how good Tiger's playing. Well, he was already playing great. He would be great if he didn't even hardly ever weight train. He's gifted and knows the game so well and so determined, it seems like. But with that said, you don't want to turn these golfers into bodybuilders. Who cares what you look like if you're playing super well? Not to say that you don't need to be strong and add muscle. You just have to be judicious in your limitations, your deficits, and what's your goal. You need to get a little bit stronger. So be it. You're not hitting the ball far enough. Great. But it isn't just about going and bench pressing like people thought Tiger may or may not have been doing. They claim that he benched 315 during this time. I don't know if that's correct or not.
I
But
heard that as well.
that
I think
wouldn't be a
that was in
goal.
Golf Digest. Yeah, I think that was in one of the golf magazines. That was
Yes,
the rumor.
that's public that they talked about. He benched 315. I think that the golfers should press with their chest and shoulders with some dumbbells and kettlebells and that kind of stuff. Benching 315, I don't see the the juice being worth the squeeze with that.
Mm-hmm.
So I think that that's probably part of the blame, where people think that everyone needs to train really heavy to be able to be effective at their golf, and that's not the case. You want it to carry over to the field.
Yeah, when I look at the ultimate body type of strong, mobile, flexible, strong in the right places, and what to do that, as I went through my learning curve of getting too big and doing too much weight, and what damage did it cause? Now you got more mass, as you said earlier, and it's pushing down on the disc, even if you're not, just walking in general, if you put on your frame, if you put too much mass on top, it's going to push down. Michael Jordan and his trainer went through that, when he came back, he had to lose some weight to save on his knees. But through my curve and now getting into listening to you, and backing off, but when I look at somebody as far as a golfer, if he's not a golfer, but I would say the body type of ultimate strength would be Pavel Tsatsouline, y'all's friend. And you look at him and it's like, man, that guy's in really good shape. He's not big, but I bet, and the guy's probably as in good a shape as anybody on the planet, even guys 20 years younger than him. He's just a physical specimen. It's not something that's going to blow you away, but the guy can do just about anything that I've seen.
Yeah, and you know what? He's not going to squat, bench, or deadlift anything probably that you'll be like, wow, I didn't see. He doesn't care about that, but he will endurance you and hand grip, glute strength, like all these things that you develop with kettlebells that you don't need a barbell with. And he's done a hell of a job with the kettlebell and the coaching. And yeah, he's a specimen himself, but and you can get a lot done with a kettlebell. I guess is my point. You don't need a barbell, especially golfers and basketball players. They're so obsessed with the barbell. I would challenge the people out there listening to play golf that lift with barbells. I love barbells. Okay, let me preface it with I love barbells. I still use barbells, but it's not the only way, especially if you don't use a barbell in competition. You don't do that in golf. You don't do that in the UFC. You don't do that in jiu-jitsu or the tennis match on Saturday or whatever it may be. So at the end of the day, do you want to be really good at your hobby or your sport, or do you want to just sacrifice some of that by looking good or getting stronger just because that's a side hobby of yours? And I see that happen with multi-million-dollar athletes. They're doing dumb stuff in the weight room just so they can post an Instagram video or get sponsors or whatever, but it's completely distracting and taking away from what their end goal is, and that's being the best in the NHL or NFL or MLB or whatever it may be. There was a study done a long time ago by a friend of mine. In 2018, I went and spoke to all of the NHL strength coaches. There's a summit in Orlando, and I was invited to speak about gift of injury, and so I worked with some of the coaches there. And at dinner that night, they told me that the minimal strength that you need in the NHL for a particular position to be able to hold your own, all you need to do is be able to bench 275. That's at the maximum. Anything more than that doesn't help. It might even take away your athleticism. But if you can bench about 275, having that strength to be able to do it, whatever it is you need to do, and not get pushed around is what that metric showed. If you can bench 275, you have the minimal strength to be able to showcase your skills and not be bullied around. The people that benched less than 185 had all kinds of trouble on the ice getting pushed around. So you had that range from above 185 to 250 to 275 that is the sweet spot for hockey players, right? That's just what they use. So hockey players, a lot of them bench press. A lot of them can't bench a plate and a quarter, unfortunately. It's really weird.
Wow. That is weird.
Yeah. But 275 was the top end of strength needed to not get pushed around by the biggest and strongest out there.
I can't have you on without talking about your book, Gift of Injury. I'm reading it right now. I highly recommend it to anybody out there. And, go to Brian's website. Again, we'll have that link directly in the summary. But just to start off, as I was reading that and your story, and I'll get out of the way in a second, but I want to make everyone aware of something that, and I could be wrong. You please correct me if I'm off. But before your injury, now you were hobbled a little bit, but when you were doing about 1,100 pound squat, is that right? That's right.
Yeah, I'm squatting.
But then when you got fixed, you had the gift of injury. You go through the entire process. You listen to Stu outside of going to the Arnold, and you learned your lesson there. But then when you come back, you do the world record squat at 1,308 pounds. Is it 1,308? Okay.
So yeah,
6. Okay, I want to get. I knew I was going to get that off. That's why I said correct.
I was going to get to. Let me tell you a funny story about that too. But sorry, go ahead.
But what I'm getting at is, that is at World Elite, I don't think people understand that. They look at that and say, wow, 300 pounds. And I'm like, okay, that's one way to look at it. Another way to look at it is to say, that's almost a 30% increase,
Yeah.
which is absolutely off the charts. If you're Joe Schmo, if you're in high school and you just start lifting weights and you have the physical capability through your genetics that you have the potential to be really strong. A 30% jump, okay, it's understandable. Elite level 30% jump is absolutely unheard of, at least in the sports that I'm aware with, in particular in golf. And for some golfers out there, just imagine Scotty Scheffler's the number one golfer in the world right now. I don't know what his average is, but let's just say for easy math, he's averaging 70. A 30% improvement is over a 2-stroke drop on average. When guys at that level and girls at that level are looking to gain a quarter stroke around, you're talking about over 2 strokes around. That's absolutely unheard of. So I just wanted to put that in context so that as you talk about your story, people can have an understanding of how powerful this method and what you guys do is and what you do is. So now I will step out of the way. And so I guess the question to that is, your story is fabulous. It's awesome. It's not ended. That segment, that chapter ended, and you're on to what you're doing now. But we don't have to go back to the beginning, but can you briefly describe what happened to you? And your injury, and then how you came back.
So a funny thing about the 06 or 08 thing, I was walking up to a restaurant, and this is about a year ago, and I hadn't seen my general practitioner for a bit of time since the record, because we had COVID, we did virtual stuff. I didn't see him. I saw his PA virtually or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
So I hadn't seen Zurkowski in a couple of years, not since the record. So because Brian, we're walking up to the restaurant and I see who it is, and it's Dr. Joe. So I go over and say, hey, how's it going? Meet his son, and he goes, yeah, man, we saw the record, and I said, yeah, I was just about to tell you that I'm done with lifting now, and I squatted 1,300, and he goes 1,306, and he just corrected me right then. I'm like, that's awesome, and that's cool that you even knew about it, and yeah, 6 pounds do matter. But yeah, he knew it better than I. I was just going to be like 1,300. He's like, no, 06. So when I saw Dr. McGill, I had previously squatted world records in 220. I squatted 1,030 in 2006. 2011, I squatted 1,185. And if you read in Gift of Injury, I hurt myself even more on that 1,185 squat. And then my squat started to regress even more into the mid 11s and low 11s. And that's when I decided to see Dr. McGill. Even though I started completely over after seeing Dr. McGill, I failed after 10 months of working with him. The next 7 years were very successful in lifting, the next 6 or 7 years. And I used all the tools that I learned from Dr. McGill. I built upon those by making adjustments to my type of strength training that I used before. I made it even better, along with Stu's core and biological adaptations. And over time, I was able to hold more weight and get bigger. My body was more resilient. I was able to tolerate that compression, daily, because you mentioned earlier that compression is cumulative with people, and just walking around, it's 2.5 times body weight compression every time you walk. So if you're 300 pounds, it just mounts up over time. I was able to build the capacity where I could get back up to 300 pounds, and my strength was through the roof. So during this time, not only was I able to hit better numbers in lighter weight classes than I'd hit previous to injury, but I was able to beat my all-time squat by, I believe it's 121 pounds, bigger than I'd ever even hit in the gym or any other time, healthy, but post-injury, using these methods and approaches. And it comes down to a time to heal and back off, retune the machine, not go back to the things that hurt me, made modifications, stop the bending and the twisting and the extending core exercises, and built a core of iron, suitcase carries, stir the pot, the McGill Big Three, those types of static hold exercises helped me build a core of iron, and I was able to go up and squat 1,300 pounds after a 10-hour drive in the car, went back home, 10 hours, not a problem with my back, and retired after that because I didn't see a better way to end it. I knew that I couldn't do this forever, and it was time to truly dedicate my life to my family. My girls were 6 months old that were actually at the meet at that time, and it was time to shut down. And to this day, it's been, over 3.5 years or so. I'm still pain and symptom free as I was before that meet and after the meet. But yeah, it was time to move on to the next thing and help as many people as possible. And instead of my efforts being kind of split between my lifting and all that stuff, now that isn't a concern anymore, I have more capacity, as the common word today, capacity. I had more capacity mentally and physically too to be able to go and help as many people as possible, and that's been able to expand. Initially, it started with a lot of powerlifters who read my story and that I was pretty popular with, but now it's branched out to average Joes and people in every continent pretty much that I work with virtually, and sometimes they come to me in person. But during that 7 years of competing after seeing Dr. McGill, I learned so much during that time. And man, I just didn't continue to make the same mistakes I did prior and made those adjustments and never really looked back. And yeah, I was able to squat the first person to ever squat over 1,300 pounds. And I thought that was a good way to go out. And during this time, I wanted something that I'd be able to kind of hang my hat up on and be good with, to be able to walk away. What can I do? What's one? Is it another world record? And I was fortunate enough to be able to break that record, walk away, and somehow I was able to do that and hit my third biggest squat of all time in a third decade. So I hit 2006 is the 2000s, 2011s, 2010s, and then 2020 started the new decade. So I slipped in there 3 different decades, all-time world record, and it's time to stop. It's not going to get better than that. Something else is going to go. I'll re-hurt my back or whatever it may be, because then people are immediately like, "You could have squatted 1350 that day. You could have." Nope, we're done. We're good there.
Good.
Let's
Yeah.
let well enough be enough.
Well, and for anyone that doesn't know, you didn't have just like a minor herniation or a tweaked muscle or a spasm. Tell everybody what your injury was.
Yeah, and I'll
And
send you a
I
picture.
read
You
on
can
it. I
use.
know it, but go ahead. Tell them what it was.
Yeah, and I'll send you a picture of it too if you want to use for a thumbnail or
Sure.
edit into the videos or whatever of the MRI before and after. But I had a fall in 2009, which caused a fracture in my spine I didn't know about, and it just continued to cascade. We talked about that cascade. It starts with a fall or something, and then the disc loses height. And I had a smashed disc at basically L4, L5, and L5S1 with end plate fractures. And my sacrum, as you can see, is basically just kind of split from that compression and cumulative loading and bending and just stresses of powerlifting. And we actually took an MRI 4 years after that initial MRI in 2013. In 2017, after lifting for another 4 years, I didn't just go, couch potato after that and just relax. I was putting effort in. I was squatting in 1100s and thousands again, pretty often. And we were able to build adaptations during this time, and it looked like a new spine. Was it a perfect 16-year-old spine? No, there's still remnants of a disc bulge there, and it's not full disc height, but it goes from no disc height to some, and the disc had remodeled and the fracture kind of filled in from stimulation properly without crossing the tipping point, and then resting for a week, and then stimulating again. So when I started back with the barbell in 2013, after that desensitization phase for months, I didn't just go right back to, squatting 500 pounds. It was kettlebells and that time of building out more pain-free capacity, not just as simply as getting pain-free and going back to lifting. The same thing happening with the golfers. A little bit of pain-free time. Let's go and play, 3 rounds of 18 holes, and I wonder why my back's killing me. I had months where I was building more capacity and earning my right to lift again. Then after a period of time, I started putting the barbell on my back again and deadlifting. but that was just starting with the empty bar, and then a quarter, and then a plate. And I took months to get back in the 500 and 600 pound range, when that's still only 50 to 60% or less of my best. And so if golfers and anyone else out there can take some wisdom from that, I only came back after 5 or 6 months at 50, 60, 70% of what my previous goal was, or what I wanted to exceed in the future. So is it going to be the exact percentage for everyone? No, but keep that in mind. It's a slow rebuild, and it's running the edge of the razor. You're running the edge of that knife. You do too much, you're done. You're gonna re-blow up. You're gonna retweak. But luckily, I minded the laws of adaptation, and I lifted sensibly. Good genetics, a little bit of luck, and a great mentor, and using the good things that I learned from my own experience and training. And I got pretty lucky to be able to not just get pain free again, because Dr. McGill did tell me, he's like, you're done. Like, I can maybe get you pain free, but you need to reconsider any type of compressive load, because that could really screw you up. And we don't want that to happen. And so I told him, I'll do everything that you say, and I'll rebuild the way you say, but I'm going to get back to lifting. And Dr. McGill said the first time we met, no, first things first, get pain free. Then we'll talk about lifting. He kind of, caved a little bit and just like, whatever, if you, who knows, maybe you're right. Maybe you get back to lifting and we write a book about it. And I held him to it.
The one of the cool things about that, not even a tangent, but an integral part of that, writing that book and going through that process, was you guys developed a very good friendship. He speaks very, very highly of you. I've listened to him on enough podcasts and listened to enough of his lectures that we're from his perspective that you guys became very, very good friends, even more so than just a doctor-patient relationship where you're getting what you want, where you're getting back to pain-free, you're getting back to a life without pain, but you're also getting back on the platform, something you love to do, and he's getting to see the benefit of his knowledge help somebody get back to world class. But in a couple of his talks, I've heard him speak very, very highly of you, where you guys have become very good, like almost family type friendship, which is great to hear.
Yeah, we're close, and yeah, he's a really, not just a great clinician and back specialist. I think he's by far the best in the world, but he's a good person, and a great friend. And yeah, he's helped me in more ways than I can ever repay. But the thing about Stu is, and he admits it, and a lot of you won't hear this a lot because people don't ask him, but he commits, he invests into people. And when we spend 3 or 4 hours with someone, we're investing in them, and that's us. We want this person to get better, not just because they're coming to us for expertise, but when people don't get better, it takes a toll. And when I told him that I was going to keep lifting, that he was stressed. He told me he was stressed as hell for the 7 years. And when I was going for that 1300, he was sick. He said he couldn't sleep at night. He was emotionally invested, and that's part of the process. When we meet with people in that assessment, we don't just look at you and you're not just a piece of paper with some statistics and such. You're a person, and we know that if this person doesn't get a little bit better, it might continue to cascade in their life, and their whole life might blow apart. I mean, there's multiple people that come and see me, and they're with their wife, and they're I had one recently where husband went to the bathroom, and again, this is the psychological aspect of the assessment. I said, "How are you doing?" I asked the wife. She goes, "I'm not good, he's not good, and we're on the verge of divorce," because his back had just made him a miserable person, miserable to be around, and something had to give. So of course I want this person to be able to get better and to save his marriage, but we can only do so much. And when we see people not get better, like if I'd have blown myself apart and Stu couldn't help me, I'm sure that would have deeply affected him, maybe even more than he admits to. And when people don't listen or follow, or even if they follow and they just don't get better for whatever reason, it's hard. So yeah, there's there's a really solid relationship that Stu and I developed. And he told me that when I went back to see him for a follow up, that, man, he says, I'm so glad you're doing better, because, man, when people don't get better, it really affects me. People don't understand that. They say you're supposed to hold off emotional attachment when you see, doctors say this. You can't get emotionally involved because it's going to corrupt your thinking, but we can't help but to get emotionally involved and want that person to get better, because that's where the extra mile comes in, where we actually
Mm-hmm.
care. We care instead of you just being a person, and we got 25 more of you to see over the next 8 or 9 hours. So it's not. That's part of why the assessment's so important. You understand the person, and sometimes you build relationships with them. But Dr. McGill is top notch, and there's a reason why he is where he is, and that's 40 years of success and work in the training center, clinic, lab. It's just now starting to pay off for him, I think, as far as the recognition I think he deserves. Those are my words.
Is what was the compelling moment that led you to become a specialist or a McGill certified practitioner? Was it that that 7 years working with him, and then understanding that you could help other people given your life experience and your expertise, or was it something else?
Well, with my background in personal training and massage therapy, that was there, but then just getting bombarded with people asking me about the process. I put the videos up on YouTube right away, and I had people just start asking me what I was doing, so I just kind of share, and then eventually it just got more streamlined, and then eventually it got to where I talked with Stu, and he saw enough people with me to understand that I was getting the hang of what was going on, and yeah, I just started seeing people, about 6 7 years ago, and a lot more about 5 years ago, right before the pandemic. But I think I've just kind of been groomed for that with my history of massage therapy, and then understanding the anatomy and physiology more than the average person, and then the training, and then seeing how many people run into these hurdles in their training program with their back and back pain, and it just kind of just took over, to be honest with you.
What do you think is the most understood thing about the McGill method?
The most misunderstood thing, I think that people think and assume that you just do the McGill Big Three and everything's great. There's some people that McGill Three would throw a spasm. They throw them into a spasm potentially. There's some people with bad knees that can't get on and off the floor. So if you say yes, everyone go and do bird dogs, and then they're just crushing their knees. They can't get back off the floor. So then you got to make modifications. It might be a standing bird dog or a wall side plank. Um,
Mm-hmm.
they think the McGill Big Three is the McGill method, and there's nothing to it. Well, actually, the McGill method is a spectrum of approaches and uh, ways to get down to the root cause of the problem with psychology, and some soft treatment, soft tissue treatment at times. For some people, they need that. A time to adjust their training. So there's a personal training aspect to that sometimes too. It's certainly not just 3 exercises that I'm sure drives him nuts when people think that, oh, I'm just going to do the big three and that's all I do. It's how you move and assessment of the loads and postures. And Miguel Big Three is just one part of it that most people can do pretty pain free, and that's the building the foundation of the core with the Big Three. Another one is that he's only worked on pig spines. They always throw that around that, oh, it doesn't matter. He worked on pig spines. Well, the most recent video I did on my YouTube, Brian Carroll 1306, one of the most recent videos, is only 10% of his testing and research has been done on pig spines. The rest are, he's done a lot of human studies, but you won't hear that. So people lie by omission about that, or just regurgitate what they hear.
Mm-hmm. Is the system? I'm sure it continually evolves. What do you see as someone who's been doing this for a long time, and you bring a different set of skills or another set of skills into the foray? What do you see as what's coming next that maybe y'all have been working on, or that is another piece to the puzzle that can help a lot of people. Because I found out that when people are sometimes too involved in what's happening within a system or a paradigm or a discipline, that the next great thing is usually coming from the periphery, because they've already gone through all the things within the system that can be look under the rock, and then there might be something on the periphery that can make another big change. And you have a very broad perspective from a lot of different things that you've done in your career. Do you see anything that you guys have maybe talked about, where you brought up to him, say, hey doc, I'm seeing this, and here's what I think might be able to help that, or is that just something that, as a collaborative group, as you guys get your certifications, and I'm sure you talking amongst each other, that there's a constant dialogue going, so it's not something that comes from the outside, just something that naturally evolves out of discussion within your profession?
It's an interesting question. I don't know that I have an answer to anything that may be coming. I will say, the more preventative education that I can put out there, because McGill isn't really on YouTube. There's really
Mm-hmm.
not many McGill clinicians on YouTube. The more preventative movement suggestions, exercise suggestions, getting people to read back mechanic and implement this stuff before they need, before they're forced to, is something that I'm going to be working on doing over the next couple of years. It's going to be avoiding back injury, avoiding these pitfalls. And I've done some videos like that, but I think that a lot of the time, unfortunately, people are going to have to fail before they're ready to listen.
Yeah,
So
you're right. And unfortunately is the word for that. Here's what you can do as preventative maintenance, so you don't end up like I did, or you don't end up like this litany of athletes in your field has, and do this, and the chance of you getting hurt significantly reduced. And be sure, do this, but also don't do this. Stay away from this. If you need modifications, I can help you with that.
yeah, and that's what I'm going to be working on for the next while, is teaching sound form, good exercise selection, good core um, exercise selection, and avoiding, like you mentioned earlier, golfers don't need to be doing a bunch of sit-ups and a bunch of heavy squats and a bunch of heavy deadlifts from the floor. They can be a lot better served by doing variations of single leg work and kettlebell work, and not sit-ups and not leg raises, but simulate what they're going to need on the golf course, using the core as a whole, the glutes and the obliques, and being able to keep the belly button or the rib cage and pelvis as one, and be able to drive through and not having energy leakages, and identifying those types of things, instead of just trying to beat it to death with a sit up, a squat, and a deadlift and a bench press. It's
Mm-hmm.
got to be fine tuned, and the nuances matter.
I don't know if we left anything out.
Yeah,
We talked about a lot.
yeah.
Do you have time for, I call it the emergency 9? It's usually, I know you're not a golfer per se. You know the
I'm not
game,
a golfer.
right? And
Yeah.
you help golfers get back to playing. But usually the emergency 9 is after, let's say, a round of 18, and the guys or the girls or the groups are sitting around and they're had lunch or a couple of drinks, and they like to maybe debate responsibly who did what on a hole, and it turns into who's better. So then they go out and they play an emergency 9 holes to see who's better or what have you. So anyway, I have an emergency 9. It's just 9 random questions to kind of wrap up and make it kind of fun. I know the first one, the last one, everyone's gotten, and they are a little golf related, but we can kind of modify it to match the powerlifting mindset.
Yeah, please be easy on me with that.
Yeah. So the first one, it's usually if somebody's in the Ryder Cup, which is obviously the marquee event of the PGA American PGA Tour, and a number of years ago they started playing a walk-up song to the first hole as the players went up there. So, and I know that, or would assume that you guys probably had something similar as you walked up on the platform, that you had a song or something that really got you going. So, if I worked with you on your golf game and I got you so good that you won a tour event and you got into the Ryder Cup, we'll use that analogy, and then they were going to play a song that you really like and you got the crowd going, what would you have them play?
Um, Probably be a little, maybe. Well, who knows what they're playing out at? It's Italy, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, who knows what they were playing out there for the different golfers. And I would go with probably something Tool like Stingfist or something like that. Something that I listened to in the gym in the
Mm-hmm.
past, and if I were playing golf, I'd probably listen to it some too. So that'd be my come out song probably for powerlifting or golf.
All right, very cool. I remember when I started getting in a little bit of weight training for golf, to age me again, that a lot of the guys in the gym, or they would have on the overhead speaker, would be Pantera
Yeah,
or Danzig, and I mean, that really heavy metal, getting your face type stuff.
yeah.
Um,
I don't know if that's etiquette allowed with golf Pantera and this screaming. But yeah, I love Pantera too.
um, you're an author, but I have to assume that you're an avid reader as well. So, what book is on your nightstand right now? In other words, what book
Um,
are you reading?
it's funny. It's funny you asked that. I've got a couple books. One, it's not on my nightstand because I have to have my glasses and the lights are usually off by then. But I got actually a couple of them.
Why is that not
So
surprising?
this one's I'm about to. I haven't cracked it yet, but I borrowed it from my friend. It's about Winston Churchill and his secret warriors, which is pretty awesome. You know
Hmm.
that, and don't tell me about it, but I know about Winston Churchill and I know about the war, obviously. But that's one that I'm working on reading, and another one that actually this is actually on my nightstand, but I went on vacation and it came off my nightstand. And this is gonna make a lot of people love me out there, I'm sure. But it's The War on Conservatives by Mark Dies. I'm reading that one now, just about the agenda. There's obviously an agenda going on right now, and I'm a
Hmm.
registered independent. You know, I'm not some super right wing guy, but a lot of my beliefs align either in the middle, or there's certainly not very many left ideals these days that I'm a classic liberal when it comes to my views. Not a modern liberal, a classic liberal that
Hmm.
leans conservative with God and a lot of different things in that perspective. But other things are more in the middle of the road. But it's a crazy time right now for sure. So that's maybe some people will automatically blackball me now since I'm reading a book called that. Great. I don't need them anyway.
No kidding. Um, Hollywood calls you, and of all the people I ask this question, you would be the one that this would likely happen to. So Hollywood calls you and they say, Brian, we followed your life, we followed your story, we love it. We're going to make a movie, or want to make a movie about your story, and we're going to let you, or maybe even better yet, we're going to let your wife cast the actor who plays you. Who are you going to have them cast?
My wife is going to decide this.
Well, I guess I could ask you, and you could probably speak for your wife on this because you know her probably. I'm assuming very well. But so who would you cast as yourself, and who do you think your wife would cast as you?
Oh my God. Good
Any
question.
actor out there that you'd want to play you, whether you just like them, the way that they go about their things, or they look like you, or they represent kind of the how you do things. Usually the misses, when I ask guys this are on a show, usually a missus will pick the best looking, um, or the husband will pick the best looking actress. But as far as who would you have play you?
I don't know, but I'm making a note here for my to ask my wife when I see her later
Okay.
who she would think, because it's an interesting question. Off the top of my head, who would I have play me? I don't have any idea. Maybe he's dead now. Maybe Philip Seymour Hoffman or someone fat like that. I don't know. I'm kidding about that, but I don't know. That's a good question. I don't know who would play me.
All right, I'll make it. I'll let you skip on that if you do me one small favor. If
Sure.
when you think of it, and or you ask your missus, if you get on your social media and you just do a very short, say, hey, Pete and I talked about this on Golf 360. Who would play me in a movie about my life? Here's the answer, and tag Golf 360 in it, and I'll let you slide on that one.
Okay. Fair enough.
Cool. Let's see. Moving on. If somebody gave you $25,000 and two first class tickets anywhere in the world you wanted to go, where are you all going?
Um, Never been to Italy before. I probably want to go. I probably want to go to Italy and spend that money and that time there and eat some good food and relax and yeah, chill out. And yeah, I think I've never been, and that's where I would yeah, I'd like to go to
Hard
Italy.
to argue with that one.
Yeah, you like it? You
Um,
been?
I have not been. Want to go? In fact, you know, I was always a big pasta guy growing up as a kid, and
Mm-hmm.
then when I had my health issues, they took me off carbs, went very strong keto, and had the sickness and everything. And now, anytime I eat that stuff, I don't feel good, so I stay away from it. But all the friends I've had who have been to Italy said they've been over there a week or two or how long they've been, and they eat pasta regularly, and it does not have the inflammation effects that the pasta here does. And talking to some of the doctors I know, they believe that it obviously has to do with the ingredients that go into it.
Oh, for sure.
Non-GMO and everything else is completely different. And I think Italy is very, very strong on their regulatory laws and everything on what can go into food.
Yeah, I'm sure they're certainly more strict than the FDA,
No kidding.
which is just completely bizarre with how they regulate things. They're overly strict on things they probably shouldn't be, and then completely loose on every 75% of the stuff that's coming in a cardboard box.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. Most used app on your phone.
Most used app, um, probably the text message app.
That's a
Yeah, I try
simple
not to
one, but it
text
makes
so
sense.
much. Beyond that, maybe YouTube, because whenever I need to know something, I'll search on YouTube.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, YouTube is probably the most. If I were to pull up and see the time spent, YouTube. Now I don't go on Instagram anymore. I don't go on Facebook. I don't go on Twitter. I avoid all that stuff. But I will go on YouTube because it's not quite as. It's still volatile, but it's not quite like these other pages.
All right. Let's see. This one is somebody who had to eat a lot, but you obviously ate healthy because you're a professional athlete, but you enjoy food, as do I. If you could put any restaurant or any restaurant chain in your kitchen, which one are you going to put in there?
Probably PF Chang's.
That was quick.
Yeah, like some of these I'm having to think, but I love PF Chang's so much that now when I was in Doha, Qatar, I had some clients out there and I was there for 2 weeks. And I went to the mall on my downtime because I wasn't working the whole time. I had just a couple hours a day, then I was free. So I would go to the mall and man, it's completely westernized. Like they had everything from Shake Shack to Five
Jeez.
Guys, and then they had a Texas Roadhouse inside the mall, downhill skiing, and then they had a PF Chang's, but the PF Chang's had a menu this thick, from ribeyes to everything you can imagine. Yeah, Doha's pretty cool over there in Qatar, um, and especially if that menu was available. But the regular PF Chang's menu isn't bad either.
Not too bad. What would be your superpower? When I was writing this one out, I thought this is kind of a stupid question. There's a guy who squatted 1,306 pounds. Did I get that wrong again? No, 13.6 is the right one. But here's a guy who squatted 13.6. I'd say it's obvious that's his superpower. But aside from your physical abilities, what would you say your superpower is?
Probably the ability to focus on something so much, and then if I really want it, it doesn't matter. I'll get it. Or just like when I was struggling with my back for those years, and then finally got where I needed to be, and then fell off again. I wasn't just going to quit. Yeah, it was a kick in the nuts, obviously, and it sucked. But I was either going to break my head going against that brick wall, or the wall was going to cave. So either way, now it wasn't just through forcing my back into cooperating, but my mindset was
Mm-hmm.
very stoic, and it didn't matter at the time. That was before the word stoic was real popular to use. It didn't matter. I wasn't going to let the wind blow me one way or another like people are, depending on the day. No, I'm going to get back. I'm going to get better. And I'm going to do what I want to do. And then when I'm done, I'll know I'm done. And it did work out that way. But it wasn't easy. Doesn't mean that I didn't have doubts at times. But the mental toughness and the fortitude to stay locked onto a goal. And ever since I was a kid, if I get something in my head, it's very hard to turn it off and to steer me away.
Yeah, that work. It can be very exceptional, and it could work the other way. If you would have went in the other opposite direction, no one could have steered you back to say, Brian, come on, you can do this. Yeah, I think maybe one reason we get along well is I have similar things where I get very, very stubborn on what I want to do, and I'm not going to deviate. Sometimes that might be a detriment. Sometimes most of the time it works for the betterment. But if you get that negative pole, I have found for myself, it can be work against you.
Yeah,
But
and you got to be a little bit delusional. I think you don't want to live in delusion, but you have to be shooting for a lofty goal. You got to be a little bit delusional to think that you can do it, right? So you don't want to be out of your head, but also you don't want to you know not have high expectations and goals, and you're going to get disappointed. But yeah, you got to be a little bit delusional, I think, if you're going to do anything that either hasn't been done before or something that is up here for your genetic ability, whatever it may be, right? You gotta be a little delusional to think that you can achieve it. So that will work against you at times too, and it's worked against me where I thought I could just train through my back pain and
yeah,
still squat 1,100 pounds.
yeah. Couple more. What is in the last year? What is your favorite purchase under $1,000?
In the last year, favorite purchase. Oh yeah, okay. It's my new rifle that I had someone make for me. That's a 300 blackout. I have a bunch of
Wow.
223 and 7.62, but this one's a 300 blackout. And I don't know if it's going to get you demonetized or whatever, but I haven't shot it yet, and I got it within the last year. And I actually had one of my clients, uh, back clients. We became friends, and he built it for me. I, of course, paid him for it, but he built it for me and put all the pieces together. And I've yet to shoot it. But yeah, that's probably my favorite purchase in the last
Cool.
year or so.
And then the last one, again, you're not a golfer, but I know you know who these people are, and you have probably followed. You're a sports guy, and you follow enough sports that, in your opinion, and I'm not going to hold you to it, of course. Who would be the greatest golfer of all time, in your opinion?
Well, I wrote an article on this about I want to say 5 or 6 years ago, and I was just, and I don't remember the numbers anymore, so forgive me for that. But I was basically talking about the majors win record, right, with Jack and Tiger,
Mm-hmm.
and you saw where Tiger was before this cascade of injuries just took over his life, right, and his life kind of blew up. But then he had this drought where he didn't win any majors for this period of time, and you would have thought probably around, what was it, maybe '09, that it's a done deal. He's gonna surpass Jack's record. He's gonna be by far the greatest golfer, undisputed, all this stuff. It hadn't happened in the last 14 years, 15 years. It
Mm-hmm.
just hasn't. Yeah, he won the Masters in what, 18? Came back, won the Masters.
Not yeah, 19. I mean, that was a great story, and then the leg, then the wreck, and I mean,
Yeah,
as you know, it's hard enough to come back from a back injury, in particular in anything
yeah, and
but
he's
golf.
he's been public about all the fusions he's had, and he had to pull out a
Yep.
couple weeks ago because he was having back spasms. Yeah, I would have to say that Tiger. I would say, it's obviously arguable, but just Tiger. I'd say Tiger's the greatest, and he's probably going to still do it until he absolutely can't anymore. Because from what I understand, his drive to be number one and to get those wins and just stay so rigid about it is unlike anything people have seen before. He's so obsessed
Mm-hmm.
about it, and he used to talk about it, but I think that I don't know if he's going to win many majors or too many tournaments for that matter, going forward. But I don't know if I'd really doubt him. But I do also know the limitations that injury can put upon even the greatest of athletes. So I don't know. Who do you think the greatest golfer of all time is?
I definitely think that he's played the greatest golf.
Yeah,
It's the answer, I think, would boil down to what would be someone's definition or interpretation of the greatest. Jack obviously had the greatest career. and then Tiger played the greatest golf. So to me, it's an interesting question. That's why I ask it to everybody, because it's more like it's a coin flip, and it's dependent upon someone's idea or their definition of what the greatest encompasses.
Yeah, and then you have other people that see. I wouldn't know who they are right now, but you have some golfers the last 4 or 5 years that have been on tears. Yeah, I mean, some people would say, no one's won this much in this streak. But yeah, so you have to quantify what is greatest.
Mm-hmm.
The most wins, the most consistency, the most feared for the longest period of time. That'd be Tiger, probably,
Yep.
right?
Yeah. Nobody played the level of golf that he did. I think everybody would agree on that. He was
Yeah,
virtually untouchable for set periods of time. There was no doubting that. But and that question has been in every single podcast I've had, and you're 136 if I'm not mistaken. I would say Tiger is in the lead about 60 to 40%.
and Jack's the other 40.
Jack, yeah, and then there might be a miscellaneous that some people threw in somebody here or there, Ben Hogan or some of the old time golfers, or maybe Kathy Whitworth, who was in the ladies. She won 70 some of the tournaments. So there's room for debate in there, but I think the bulk, 99.9% of everybody is going to say they're Tiger or Jack. I don't,
Yep.
there's no discrepancy there. And
Yeah.
again, I don't think there's a right or wrong answer. I just find it curious and that's why it's the last question
I
that we
love
got about.
watching Sunday afternoon, like for instance TPC. I'll go out there sometimes and watch, but man, the intensity, especially going into 17, because that's a tricky one, right? I've
Mm-hmm.
never played it. I know what it is, and I know it's a hard one to nail, man. You're off just a little bit, you're in the water every way, right?
The funny thing about the playing great streak. Obviously, Scotty Scheffler's the number one golfer in the world now, and he's playing great. And he's won 8.5 million in the last 10 days.
He won.
Uh,
Did he win TPC
he won TPC. He won
back
by
to
one.
back?
Yep. Yes.
First person
So,
to ever do it. Even Tiger didn't get two of
so,
them, right? He's got one.
yeah. Somebody brought up to him, you've been number one, whatever it was, X amount of weeks, and you have 7 wins now in your young career, and you only have 75 more to go to catch Tiger. He goes, it's unbelievable to even comprehend
It is. He's a
that
Swede
career.
too, right?
No, Scotty's from Texas. He grew up in
Is he
Texas.
okay? There's a couple
Yeah,
Swedes up there in the top. What in the 10, right? That
yeah,
surprise me every time.
yep. People want to reach out to you. They're suffering with back trouble. And they want to contact you. They want to get your book. They want to read Gift of Injury. Again, I highly recommend it. Or Back Mechanic, or call you up, do a consult. Where is the best place to find you, follow you, check out all your material?
Yeah, so on social, I'm Brian Carroll 1306. That's you can just search that. But my home base, where I have all my content from the last 10 years plus, is powerrackstrength.com. And you can just Google search that, or just put in powerrackstrength.com, Brian Carroll, and it'll come up. And I give you a list or a checklist to start with on what I think you should do to set yourself up for success before we do the call. It isn't because I want you to read my book because I'm going to make $1 million off of book sales this year. It's to get you to understand that I'm not going to have you take time off or do something that I didn't do myself if I find it necessary. So sometimes people can find the relatability there when they read the book and understand that I did rebuild over 18 months. But I have a list of suggested steps before working with me. And then you could book a consult there. I suggest reading Back Mechanic and Gift of Injury. We start virtually, but some people with complicated mechanisms I'll need to see in person. And I'm here in Jacksonville, Florida, and I have my own setup. And yeah, so stay busy with that. But Brian Carroll 1306 and powerrackstrength.com.
Cool. Brian, it's been awesome. I've enjoyed meeting you, getting to know you, talking to you again. I learned more during this episode. I'm sure a lot of people will. And if anybody out there, if you have any back issue or you don't want to have back issue, please check out Brian's info, reach out to him. Doing it prior to being injured is probably the best thing you can do. But if you have been injured, it's also going to see him is the best thing you can do.
Yeah, some people want me just to kind of troubleshoot their training program. They're like, hey, I'm starting to feel a little back tension. What do you think? And then I'll, get them before they bite the dust as far as their back goes and modify their training a little bit. I got one question for you before we close. How are you
Sure.
feeling after 2 hours plus sitting there?
Good. I got my compression. I don't remember the name of this one good, but it's helped. Inflating it, deflating it's helped quite a bit. So
Good.
game
All right.
changer
Well,
for the
then
podcast.
that's great, man. Thank you for having me. I appreciate it, Pete.
Anytime. Hang out just 1 minute. Everybody, thanks for tuning in. We'll check you out next time.